Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Civil Engineering Academy podcast. I've got a special guest today. We've got Matt here with us. Matt Loos, right? Matt Loos.
Yes, sir.
And we're excited to have him. Matt's awesome. He's been in the development world and I think has a lot to share with everybody. And so I discovered you through LinkedIn, brought you on. I thought it would be really fun to have you on as a guest. Kind of discuss how you got into that and maybe share some sweet tips with everybody here. So
Can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be good. So I guess just to begin, how did you find yourself into civil engineering? Like, how did you choose that path? And then how did you end up in the niche that you're in within civil engineering?
Yeah. I love asking this question to other engineers because it's funny the type of answers you get. And a lot of them kind of come back to, growing up and things they were interested in and, building things and all this. And I would say mine is similar. Came up, loved Legos, loved building, loved taking apart things in the garage, that kind of thing. Enjoyed, that type of activity. And I'd say, being outside, enjoying math, like all these things kind of culminated into an idea that I wanted to do engineering. I didn't know what kind. And I think that happens to a lot of people. But ultimately, and this is probably the same for most civils too, it came down to civil or mechanical. And, I chose civil just because I liked the idea of tangible items that I could work with and build and create, create.
That's awesome.
Places, And so
when I saw the course curriculum for mechanical, I was like, maybe we'll go the civil route. Just kidding.
Yeah. I just, I just couldn't see myself doing the things that I expected the mechanicals to do. Like the things I heard that, they were working on, it just didn't appeal to me, in the future. So I couldn't see myself doing that.
That's good. Yeah. And then you kind of don't know what you don't know. So until you start getting into it and you realize what civils, are actually working on, then it kind of opens your eyes to things, which is why you go to school, right? To figure some of this stuff out. So, and then how did you get into that development area?
Yeah. Even in school, you don't really know what it actually entails until you get out and like start trying new jobs and feeling out what's best for you. And so I got an internship my junior year of college, and it was just happened to be with the site development group and got to see what they were doing. And it really appealed to me from a business side. I enjoyed, the business classes that I took. I got a minor in business and enjoyed that and kind of got to do that along with the engineering. I got to mix both. And that really appealed to me. And then, just was lucky to have it, going into that internship. I came out and I really enjoyed it. So I decided to stick with it. Yeah.
I was similar, except I took an internship and discovered that's not what I wanted to do and kind of went a different route. So
that is the value of an internship. For sure.
That's why you do them, right? So they're good learning experiences. And so, wow. So you have found yourself in the development world. And I know now you have started a podcast called the Placemaking Podcast. And I've listened to a bunch of episodes. I have found them really interesting. And really for anybody that's looking to get tips and tools and advice on how to do development, it's kind of a go-to source. I really like the one you did, and I can't remember the lady's name.
Kelly.
Yeah, Kelly. about floodplains in Florida and working there. So I
Yeah.
think you got a lot of good stuff there. So why did you start that?
Yeah, it's probably similar to you as I saw value in having these conversations with other people and then also recording them. And, a lot of these conversations I've had day to day and thought, hey, this might this might actually be valuable for someone else to listen to, especially if they're interested in development. And the real estate development field is very diverse, and there's a lot of there's a lot that goes on to it that most people don't understand or know
Oh,
about.
sure.
And so, just kind of pulling back the veil and talking to uh, all these different subject matter experts, developers themselves, and kind of get those tips and tricks. So maybe it helps either convince somebody to do it themselves, like maybe gives them just enough confidence that, hey, maybe I can do this. And or just, for seasoned people that like to hear, you know other points of view or whatnot.
Yeah.
It's
I think there's a lot of interest in doing that too. I know people just around my own, neighborhood. One guy had pulled the trigger on doing development in some different areas. And I was always surprised because you never know who jumps into that game and just goes full bore with it. But I think it's a
right.
really neat thing to do.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Yep.
Why don't you take us through a typical day for the kind of engineering that you do?
So right now I'm more in a management role, quasi management. Still do some design, um, but for those that aren't really sure about what you know the site development field, that kind of civil engineering, um, I primarily focus on developments that consist of multifamily, a mixed use, high rise, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And so it's everything 5 feet outside the building is how we look at it, is our domain.
Hmm.
So that's drainage, utilities, permitting, uh, pretty much the whole gambit. So, an architect comes in, um, paired up with a developer or an owner, and, they have a vision for the site, and then they hire out the other pieces. So we're one piece, structural engineers are another piece, mechanical engineers, and we all kind of come together to help, this vision. But
Wow.
our piece is pretty much everything on the ground and underneath it. Um,
And you're in
utilities.
Texas, right? So, I
Yeah,
mean, things are still exploding there, or what's it like there?
yeah.
I
It's
keep
it's
seeing pictures and images of just fields of homes and all kinds of stuff. It must
right.
be going crazy there.
Yeah, it's we're still one of the fastest growing places in the country, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. So
Even
we
with
stay pretty
COVID.
busy. Yeah, construction's still going.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, it sounds like you've got a lot of experience now. If you've worked your way up into a management type role, but is there a tip or a tool or any sort of career advice for an up and coming engineer that you think would be valuable for them to know about?
Yeah, of course. We've all got
Give some
something.
tips for those rising engineers.
So I guess my biggest tip would be to always continue to learn as much as you can. I mean, it's a given,
Yeah.
but graduating from college is not the pinnacle of your education, as much as some people wish it were. Um, just constantly learning and
It's always
never get
surprising
stuck in
too
a rut.
how much you learn in college and how much is actually applied to like the field that you're in. I mean, it's
Hmm.
helpful to know all disciplines, but sometimes it's always an eye opener like when you actually get out in the working world, um, what you're actually pulling from college to actually help you in your workplace. But
Right.
um it sounds like with you, you've learned a lot of new softwares, and they're not maybe not new, but you've learned a lot of software tips and tools as well. So
Yeah.
maybe you can talk about some of those.
So typically for our line of work, we use a lot of Civil 3D, which is Autodesk in the Autodesk family. But a lot of what it does is it allows us to basically design a site, and we're able to make 3D surfaces for the site and model all the utilities and that kind of thing. So that was, luckily I was able to start out with that because that's pretty much industry wide.
Yeah.
But at least for our group. So, and I try to learn the new stuff that's coming out too. Like all the BIM softwares that are coming out in Revit. And Revit doesn't necessarily apply to us, but at the moment, but it's nice to understand the capabilities since we share back and forth with architects and mechanicals and structurals, which all use it. So
good. That's good advice. Yeah, I mean, I personally agree with all of that. When you leave college, there's definitely a lot more to learn. In my own world, I learned a really specific software because I'm in the transmission world for utility designing transmission poles, and there is one software that everybody uses, and it's called PLS CAD. And so this is, I mean, it's just something you would never use unless you were in this transmission kind of world. So
yeah,
there's always something new to learn.
definitely.
How about this? How about is there something that you've learned in your journey as an engineer now into project management, a lesson that you've learned, whether it was through a mistake that you've made or that you've seen at a distance, a mistake made, and maybe what you learned from that?
Yeah, I would be lying if I didn't make any mistakes. So, really, a lot of those mistakes, my own and others that I've noticed, all come from, I would say they would stem from a lack of communication.
Yeah.
A lot of times just communicating certain things can save people lots of time. And it's something that I've learned is much more necessary than maybe it was taught in school. We had some team assignments, but even then, the actual communication portion wasn't really emphasized.
What do you
But
think happens? Why do you think the communication breaks down?
oh man, there's plenty of reasons that I can think of. Ego is a barrier often to communication.
Egos. Yeah, that's a big one.
Especially for us.
People don't want to admit either when
Right.
they're wrong on something or something else might need to be looked at again or double checked.
Right. That one's a big one for engineers. I've noticed myself in general. But I'd say ego.
This is just me thinking out of the box, but I also think a lot of engineers kind of get so focused on their own projects. You get going on something, you kind of just stay in the zone on it. And a lot of times project managers and other people that are part of the team need to know where you're at or what's going on or an issue that you have maybe seen that no one else has seen. Those kind of things come up, and sometimes you just never bring it up. You know about it, but you're not telling anybody.
Yeah, maybe lack of protocols in place for that kind of thing. Yeah. I was going to say management, but that's kind of goes along with what you were saying. A lot of times we don't want to be wrong. So
yeah, that's probably the main thing I bet with engineers.
Yeah.
They don't want to be wrong.
Definitely.
Okay, well, good advice there. Is there a recent idea or project that you've worked on where you were involved that might help others know more, I guess, about you and what's going on in your world?
Yeah.
I mean, what are you working on these days? What, you got a big project?
Yeah. So, I was thinking more along my projects that are outside of work, but,
Sure.
um, you know, the book that published last year with the Engineering Management Institute was a pretty big project. Um,
Oh, tell me about that.
yeah, it's called The Business of Engineering. I've got it sitting around somewhere, but yeah, I worked with the Engineering Management Institute to publish that last year. It's kind of a passion project for about a little over 3 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so that was a big one for me to get rid of. Knock that out,
You
because
worked
that,
on it for 3 years.
I would say, yeah, it was probably about 3 years.
Wow.
I
And
was one
so
of those that
where can people check this out?
uh, Amazon's probably the best place. I've got it on, LinkedIn and all that, but
Okay.
you can find it on Amazon.
Well, do you have some highlights from that?
Sure.
Business of Engineering?
Essentially, it's just going through certain things I learned, soon after college. It's kind of that mentality of, um, you know, kind of journaling my experience after college, and what worked and what didn't, what I gained from the college experience, and how it actually helped me, out of college, once I got a job and everything. And so it's basically just saying that, um, you know, the training that engineers have received isn't necessarily, it it needs to be updated to meet, what we're seeing right now as far as all the technology that's coming out. As engineers, we're going to be put into more leadership positions, and I didn't feel that college quite, prepared me for that. And so it's basically dissecting all the attributes that can make engineers successful, after college,
And
based on.
it's almost like you're also becoming a leader sooner, I feel like. I don't know. It just feels like in this such a rapid paced world, I know things take time, but a lot of times you're thrust into situations where they're relying on you to be, the go-to source or the leader
Mhm.
for whatever you're working on.
Right.
So yeah, I can see why that would be very valuable.
Right. Yeah. Technologies just continue to exponentially climb right now. And so, back when, the first industrial revolution, when that came about, more of these engineers were thrust into these positions because they had the technological mindset that other lay businessmen or others might not know, professional managers, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And then, we're now into the fourth industrial revolution, or getting there. And the same thing is going to occur. I mean, professional managers won't quite understand, you know, the background needed, or won't have that background needed to effectively lead.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the overall premise of the book. Is the main lesson is that, you know, those skills learned in college don't quite translate, to that yet. And just kind of trying to bridge that gap.
That's fantastic. So the
Mhm.
business of engineering. Okay.
Yes.
Go check that out. That's a
Yeah.
that's a sweet resource.
Yep.
Um Well, as we dive into this a little bit further, is there a favorite project that you've personally worked on or studied?
Yeah, the first kind of big project I worked on, and it wasn't huge, but it was a 10-story office building.
Nice.
And yeah, it was exciting because it was kind of a big deal at the time.
Sure.
And I learned so much, not only about engineering as a whole, but the business side of uh, communicating with other disciplines, architects, other engineers, um, shareholders outside of that, the city, just kind of understanding that whole process. And that was a big one for me.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's always like that first project that becomes usually the most memorable for people, I think, because you you end
Yeah.
up learning a lot from either mistakes made or just some stuff like that. So
Sink or swim.
yeah.
Yeah.
I remember I designed a steel pole for a transmission line, and I go out and hand all this stuff out to the crew members that are out there because I worked a lot with linemen. So I work with the
Uh-huh.
general foreman, and this guy has been in he's been in the field for like ever, 30 plus years, and he looks at stuff and he's picking out stuff I screwed up on big time, and
Just to
calling
your
me out
face.
on it.
Just
Yeah. So,
wow.
hey, you need to come look at this.
Yeah.
But those are learning lessons I have found, and not to be like scared of those because they're going to
Mhm.
come, one way or another. And
Yeah.
if you can learn from them, then you don't make those mistakes in the future, or you at least know what to look out for.
Mhm.
So it's just part of the learning process.
Definitely.
That's great. What's something you're interested in about today? I mean, any things top of mind that you're very interested?
I would say mobility and transportation and how we move things. That's kind of one of those exciting ideas that I really want to learn more about.
Wow.
Um, just autonomous vehicles, VTOL, ride sharing, how that's going to impact uh, everyday life, and how cities are actually constructed in the
It,
future. I think it's exciting stuff. But,
I think so too. It feels like we're right on the cusp of something like, those things are coming.
mhm.
Um, you know, and we'll maybe be older when that all happens, but it's kind of fun to talk about it now and
Yeah,
see where we go.
right. Yeah, it's interesting to learn about. Just it's crazy the integration that is kind of trying to be built into the cities, but they're a long ways off. But
Okay. Well, good. Thanks for sharing that with me.
yep.
I want to kind of throw at you some short questions, some quick answers that you can give to me on a few questions. And this is just to help other engineers that are rising up, but just little bits of pieces of advice that maybe you have for others. So the first one I have is, what's an obstacle that you faced when becoming a civil engineer?
Mm, it's a big one.
Yeah. What do you think was a bigger obstacle for you?
I think the biggest obstacle for me was believing that I had to know all the answers to every question I was asked.
Okay.
you know, um, I don't. The idea that I was supposed to be a subject matter expert, at these meetings, or even though a lot of those early meetings, I was with others that were actually signing and sealing the plans in the future. I still felt like I went to school for this, right? I should know this,
Yeah, for
But
sure.
yeah, and I took that very personally, not knowing all those answers. So I think that was a big obstacle. Is just like, hey, it takes some time to learn. Um,
That's great.
just not taking it personally when you don't know everything.
That's great advice. How about this one? What's the best advice you've ever received, or just good advice in general?
this goes along with the book. Um, so kind of the title of the book I got by some advice that was given to me is that we were not just engineers, we were in the business of engineering, hence the book. Is basically there's a lot, we're one piece, and just learning to work with others and understand why our piece is important and how it affects others. Because engineering is a service, but it's you still got to understand what piece of the puzzle you are and how that, and it goes back to management as well, the business side. But I think that was the biggest advice that stuck to me, is just trying to learn more about the business behind the engineering as well.
Okay. That's great. That's really good advice. I personally, I think, working in a utility, I'm kind of a fish out of water a little bit because I'm a civil engineer in an electrical engineering world a little bit, although they do hire a lot of civil engineers there. Basically all disciplines are needed, but once you learn what you do and you start learning what other people do, it just kind of opens your eyes to all the pieces that are involved in making either a company or a business or a project all move forward. And so I do think that's just spot on. Another question for you: what's a personal habit that contributes to your success as an engineer? Or do you have any?
Oh yeah, tons. I would say biggest habit is reading, not just reading, but mainly reading voraciously. I enjoy reading and learning, and I think that's ultimately a habit that has created more success for me. And it wasn't something I picked up in college. I was not a huge reader in college, but
I was the same.
yeah, we had enough to read.
You don't have time for that.
Yeah. So afterwards, with all my free time I had, but yeah, I think learning and reading, those go hand in hand. But
Good habit. Is there a particular book or any books that stand out to you?
There's a couple. I would say Ego is the Enemy is one of my favorite
Ego is the
ones.
Enemy.
Yeah.
Okay. I have never read that.
Yeah, it's a good one by Ryan Holiday. And it's kind of talking about what I talked about previously, how ego sometimes stops us from either asking questions or, really, that's the big one, is being too insecure to ask those questions because your ego is in the way to basically stop you from showing somebody that you don't know everything, kind of thing. And that book kind of tells you ways that you can actually pull that back a little bit and understand it and kind of recognize when that's going to be an issue. And so I thought that was an actionable book
That's great.
I liked. Yeah.
We'll keep note of that. We'll put it in some notes here so we can let others be reminded of it. That's great. Another question for you. We already talked about a book that you'd recommend. This one's kind of a fun one, but if you had all the resources or all the knowledge that you had in the world, what's something you would like to be a part of in the world of civil engineering? What would you do?
Yeah. So we talked about transportation and that kind of thing. And that's a pretty cool project. That would be cool to understand how all of this is integrated together, the autonomous vehicles, smart cities, that kind of thing. But I would say sustainability in construction.
Okay.
If I had, it's such a big part of, they say the pollution from construction activities is one of the greatest producers of pollution. Sorry. And so if we could come up with, ways to make it a little more sustainable, it's not as big, exciting, and sexy as the transportation one, but I think that would have a pretty big impact.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, every time I read about how much concrete we use and what that's doing to the stuff, I agree with you. So
Yeah.
No, that's great. Yeah, I think with everything that you've shared with us today, I think, as a beginning engineer or even someone experienced, there's going to be something here that you could learn from, a tip or tool, even a lesson learned. So I think this is all very valuable for those that are listening to this. And I really thank Matt for all these put into helping the podcast and sharing some of his life experiences with us. So maybe as we wrap up, Matt, why don't is there any lasting piece of guidance or the best way to contact you if you want to be contacted, to connect with you if they have any questions about development or either just getting more information from you? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, for your first question here, the last bit of advice, I would just say stay hungry, never be afraid to ask questions, and just enjoy the process of learning and problem solving. That's why you're an engineer, right? So and to find me, you can find me on LinkedIn like you did, or Twitter.
Hey, it's a good way to do
it. It is a big piece of networking for me. I enjoy LinkedIn. Or you can find on the podcast for the placemakingpodcast.com. So.
Yeah. Go subscribe to that one. Leave a good review too. The Placemaking Podcast. It's good stuff. Well, thanks, Matt, for jumping on and sharing your wisdom with us.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
All right. We'll see you later.
All right.